A new beginning or a mistake in the making? Camille Parker had always prided herself on being a woman of balance. At 35, she had managed to carve out a respectable career in marketing while being a dedicated single mother to her 10-year-old daughter, Amira. Juggling motherhood and corporate deadlines had never been easy, but she had learned to wear her responsibilities like armor, shielding herself from the distractions of the world, especially love. Love had failed her once before. Her ex-husband, Jason, had once been the love of her life, a man who had whispered promises of forever, only to leave her heart shattered and her trust in men irreparably broken. She had given him everything, her youth, her dreams, her faith in happily ever afters, and in return, he had given her years of neglect, betrayal, and, eventually, abandonment. Camille had moved on, not with another man, but with purpose. She had built a home for herself and Amira, a modest yet cozy 2-bedroom apartment filled with warmth and love. It was their safe space. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon always lingered in the air from their weekend baking sessions, and Amira's colorful drawings covered the refrigerator like a museum of memories. Amira was Camille's world. With her tight curls and inquisitive brown eyes, she was a quiet but brilliant child, preferring the company of books and sketchpads over loud playgrounds and noisy social gatherings. She spent hours lost in her pink journal with its tiny heart-shaped lock, filling its pages with thoughts she never spoke aloud. Camille understood her daughter's solitude, they were similar in that way. Love had been an unreliable force in Camille's life, and she had vowed never to let another man disrupt the world she had built for herself and Amira. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. A night of change. The night of the charity gala was supposed to be uneventful. Camille hadn't planned on attending, but her boss, an overly enthusiastic woman named Diane, had insisted. "It's about networking, Camille. You need to show face, make connections," Diane had said, waving an invitation in front of her like it was a golden ticket. Camille had reluctantly agreed, not because she wanted to, but because saying no to Diane was like trying to stop a moving train. So, she found herself slipping into a sleek navy blue dress, applying a touch of makeup, and stepping out of her usual routine for a night that she expected to be nothing more than small talk, forced smiles, and an early exit. She hadn't expected to meet him. Daniel Carter. He was charming in a way that made her skeptical. Handsome, yes, with sharp cheekbones and a confident, easygoing demeanor. His deep blue eyes held a glint of mischief, and his smile was the kind that made people feel instantly comfortable. Camille wasn't impressed easily, but Daniel had a way of making conversations feel effortless. He wasn't just charming. He was attentive. Unlike other men who seemed to listen only as a courtesy, Daniel seemed genuinely interested in her words, her thoughts, her life. "You have this incredible energy about you," he had said, watching her over the rim of his whiskey glass. Camille had scoffed. "Is that your best line?" He had chuckled. "I don't do lines." And somehow, against her better judgment, she had found herself enjoying his company. One conversation turned into two. Then a dance. Then a late-night coffee. Then, a date. Then another. Before she knew it, weeks had passed, and Daniel had become a part of her routine. Camille fought it at first. She was cautious, unwilling to let her guard down. But Daniel was persistent, patient in ways she hadn't expected. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He just was, showing up with steady kindness, proving with actions rather than words that he was different. He treated Amira with warmth, too, which mattered more to Camille than anything else. He never forced himself into her life, never tried too hard to win her over. He simply made himself present, a comforting presence that Amira seemed to accept in quiet curiosity. Camille began to believe, maybe, just maybe, love wasn't a lost cause after all. A proposal too soon. 6 months later, he proposed. It had been a beautiful evening, dinner at her favorite restaurant, soft candlelight, a quiet, intimate atmosphere. When he got down on one knee, she froze. It was too soon. Wasn't it? But Daniel was a good man. He was patient. He was kind. He had been nothing but wonderful to her and Amira. So why did her chest feel tight with hesitation? She looked at Amira, who sat beside her, eyes wide with unreadable emotions. Camille hesitated. But then she saw the hope in Daniel's eyes, the love he had for her. And for the first time in a long time, she chose faith over fear. She said yes. Wedding bells and warning signs. The wedding was set for a small, intimate gathering, nothing extravagant, just close family and friends. Amira, however, had been distant in the days leading up to it. Camille noticed it, the way she withdrew into herself, how she clutched her pink journal tighter than ever, scribbling furiously but never sharing her thoughts. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Camille asked one evening, sitting beside her daughter on the couch. Amira nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on her journal. Camille placed a gentle hand on hers. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Another nod. No words. Camille sighed, deciding to give her space. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was change. Maybe it was nothing. A wedding to remember, for the wrong reasons. The wedding day arrived, a picture-perfect setting. Camille stood at the altar, hand in hand with Daniel, ready to take the leap. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. It happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, Amira was standing quietly to the side, her journal clutched in her hands. The next, Daniel turned to her, his expression darkening. Then, the unthinkable happened. A sharp crack echoed through the air. Gasps filled the room. Camille's heart stopped. Daniel had struck Amira. A slap. Hard. Unforgiving. Amira stumbled back, her journal slipping from her hands, pages fluttering like fallen petals. Silence fell. For a moment, Camille couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then, rage. Fury unlike anything she had ever felt. The world blurred. All she saw was him. And all she knew was, this wedding was over. A mother's wrath and a daughter's truth. The entire hall stood frozen in time, the sound of the slap still echoing like a gunshot. Every face in the wedding crowd was locked in stunned silence, eyes wide, breaths held. No one moved. No one spoke. But Camille did. She moved before she could think, before logic could catch up with rage. Her hands, usually so steady, so careful, shoved Daniel back with such force that he stumbled, knocking over a chair. Gasps filled the air, but she didn't care. "What the hell did you just do?" The words tore from her throat like fire, each syllable laced with fury. She had never raised her voice like this before, never felt her body tremble with such uncontainable rage. Daniel's face flickered with something, shock, regret, fear, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He straightened himself, brushing off his tuxedo as if he was the victim of some accident. "She was being disrespectful," he said, voice even, as if that excused what he had just done. Camille saw red. She turned to Amira, who stood motionless, her tiny hands curled into fists, her eyes staring at the floor. The entire room felt suffocating, and Camille's heart pounded in her ears. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter, her hands trembling as she cupped Amira's cheeks, gently tilting her face up. A red mark had already started to form on her soft skin. "Baby, are you okay?" Camille whispered, her voice breaking. Amira didn't answer. She just blinked, her eyes filled with something Camille couldn't decipher. Hurt. Fear. Betrayal. Tears threatened to spill from Camille's own eyes, but she swallowed them back. She couldn't break now. She had to be strong for Amira. The wedding guests started murmuring amongst themselves. Some people awkwardly looked away. Others took out their phones, recording, whispering. Nicole, Camille's best friend, pushed her way through the crowd and knelt beside them. Camille, Nicole's voice was sharp, protective, furious. Take Amira and go. Now. Camille didn't need to be told twice. She stood up, gripping Amira's small hand tightly. Without another glance at Daniel, she turned on her heels, her wedding gown swishing behind her, and stormed out of the hall. The wedding was over. A wound that words couldn't heal. Back at their apartment, Camille stripped out of the wedding dress as if it burned her skin. She had never felt so stupid. So blind. So furious. Daniel had fooled her. She had let him. For 6 months, she had ignored the nagging gut feeling, the small but persistent voice in the back of her mind whispering, something is off. And now, Amira had paid the price. Camille sat on the couch, still trembling, still trying to breathe through the storm of emotions inside her. Amira sat curled up in the corner, clutching her pink journal to her chest like a shield. Camille watched her, heart aching. Baby, talk to me. Nothing. Did something happen before today? Has Daniel ever hurt you before? A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Amira lifted her gaze. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. He didn't like me. Camille felt like she had been punched. What do you mean? Amira swallowed, her fingers tightening around her journal. He pretended to be nice to me when you were around. But when we were alone, he didn't like me. Camille's breath hitched. Did he hurt you before today? Amira shook her head. Not like today. But, he would say mean things. He told me I was too much work. That you deserved a better daughter. That if you really loved me, you wouldn't be alone forever. That maybe I was the problem. Camille's stomach twisted so violently that she thought she would be sick. How had she missed this? How had her own daughter been carrying this alone? Tears slipped down Amira's cheeks. I didn't want to ruin it for you, she whispered. You were happy. And just like that, Camille shattered. She pulled Amira into her arms, holding her so tightly that she could feel her little heartbeat against her chest. Oh, baby, she whispered into her curls. I don't care about him. You are my happiness. You are my whole world. No man, no one, comes before you. Amira sniffled, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of Camille's sweater. For the first time that night, she finally let herself cry. The aftermath, a battle for justice. The next morning, Camille was done being broken. She was angry. Daniel hadn't just ruined a wedding, he had emotionally tormented her child. And the more she thought about it, the more she knew she wouldn't let him get away with it. Nicole came over, ready for war. We're pressing charges. Camille nodded. I'm filing a restraining order. Daniel had texted her that morning, a pitiful attempt at justifying his actions. It was just a misunderstanding, Camille. You're overreacting. You're letting a child come between us. Think about what you're throwing away. Camille had never felt so disgusted in her life. She blocked his number. Then, she called her lawyer. By the afternoon, she had filed for a restraining order against Daniel and reported him for child endangerment. The news spread quickly. The wedding video had gone viral, someone had recorded the entire thing. The slap. The gasps. Camille's reaction. And now, Daniel wasn't just a groom, he was a public disgrace. His company distanced themselves from him. His friends, what few decent ones he had, turned their backs. The internet tore him apart, and Camille let it happen. He deserved worse. Healing and moving forward. Days passed. Then weeks. The whispers around the incident died down, but Camille and Amira were left picking up the pieces. It wasn't easy. Amira still carried the emotional wounds, still hesitated before speaking sometimes, still held her journal close like a secret. Camille spent more time with her, making sure she felt safe, loved. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Amira finally said, "I'm glad you didn't marry him." Camille kissed her forehead. "Me too, baby. Me too." And as she held her daughter close, she realized, this was the love she had been searching for all along. Not the fleeting promises of a man, but the unconditional, unbreakable bond of a mother and her child. That was enough. That was everything. And finally, after all the pain, all the mistakes, all the regrets, Camille knew they were going to be okay, picking up the pieces and facing the truth. The days following the disastrous wedding felt like walking through the wreckage of a hurricane. Everything Camille had believed about love, about second chances, about trusting again, was in ruins. She tried to focus on the essentials: work, home, and, most importantly, Amira. Her daughter had always been a quiet child, but now, silence had taken on a different meaning. It wasn't the peaceful solitude of a girl lost in her thoughts, it was something heavier. Something wounded. Every night, Camille watched as Amira clutched her pink journal tighter, writing furiously. And every night, Camille hesitated before asking, "What are you writing about, baby?" Because deep down, she was afraid of the answer. A world that no longer felt safe. Camille didn't just hate Daniel, she loathed him. Not because of what he had done to her, but because of what he had done to Amira. He had taken something from her child. He had planted the idea that she was unwanted, that she was a burden. That was the part Camille couldn't forgive. Even though Daniel was out of their lives now, his words lingered like a shadow over their home. She had already filed a restraining order. She had already cut all ties. But at night, lying in bed, she wondered, was it enough? Had she failed Amira by ever letting this man into their lives? Nicole, her best friend, had been relentless in trying to shake her out of her self-loathing. "Listen to me," Nicole had said one evening, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "You are not a failure. You're a human being who believed in someone. You loved. That's not a crime." Camille exhaled slowly. "But it cost Amira." Nicole sighed. "And now you're fixing it. That's what matters. Do you know how many women would have ignored this? Made excuses? You didn't. You chose your daughter over everything. That makes you a damn good mother." Camille wanted to believe that. She needed to. The first nightmare. It started a week later. Camille woke to the sound of muffled cries. She rushed into Amira's room, flipping on the light. Her daughter was curled in the corner of her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, body shaking. Camille rushed to her side, pulling her into her arms. "Shoo, baby, I'm here. I'm right here." It took minutes before Amira spoke. And when she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He was in my dream," she said. "He told me I ruined your life. That you'll hate me now." Camille's chest tightened with a pain so sharp it felt like a knife wound. She pulled Amira closer, stroking her curls. "Listen to me," she said, steady, firm, unbreakable. "Daniel lied to you. He was a bad man who wanted to make you feel small because he was small inside. You didn't ruin anything, baby. You saved me." Amira sniffled. "Really?" Camille kissed the top of her head. "Really?" She stayed there for hours, holding her daughter as she drifted back into sleep. But Camille didn't sleep at all. That night, she made a decision. This wasn't just about healing. This was about erasing every lie Daniel had poisoned Amira with. And she would do whatever it took to make sure her daughter never doubted her worth again. Taking back control. Camille took the next few weeks off work. She didn't just need time, she needed to rebuild. The first step was therapy. Amira had always been hesitant about talking to strangers, but Camille sat beside her during the first session, holding her hand. It took a while. But then, slowly, Amira started speaking. The words were hesitant at first. Then they poured out like water breaking through a dam. The loneliness. The fear. The way she had known Daniel didn't like her but had kept quiet, hoping it would change. Camille listened, heart aching, but she didn't cry. She needed to be strong. When the session was over, Amira looked at her, waiting. Camille smiled, brushing a curl from her face. "I'm so proud of you." And for the first time in weeks, Amira smiled back. An unfinished battle. Camille thought she had seen the worst of it. She was wrong. 2 months later, just when she thought they were moving forward, she got an email. From him. It was short. "I think we should talk. You're overreacting. Be mature about this." Camille's blood boiled. She hadn't spoken to him since that night. Hadn't wanted to. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could blast him. Tell him exactly what she thought of him. But she didn't. She forwarded the email straight to her lawyer. Then she blocked him. Again. She was done letting Daniel have any place in her life. Mother and daughter, stronger than ever. Months passed. The nightmares became fewer. The pink journal, once a place for silent pain, started to hold different words. Happier words. Camille and Amira spent more time together, baking, reading, even taking weekend trips just for the two of them. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Amira leaned her head against Camille's shoulder. "You know what?" she murmured. "What, baby?" "I don't think I want a stepdad anymore. I think I just want you." Camille smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Then that's all you'll ever need." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Camille realized something. She had spent so much time believing she needed to find love again to complete her family. But it had always been complete. Right here. Just the two of them. And that was more than enough. Shadows of the past and the fight for peace. Life had begun to settle into something close to normal. Camille and Amira were healing. Slowly. Carefully. One day at a time. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were fewer now. Amira spoke more, smiled more. And when she wrote in her pink journal, it wasn't with the desperate scribbles of a child carrying too much weight. It was different now. Better. Camille had worked hard to make their home feel like a safe place again. They redecorated Amira's room together, new paint, new bedding, even fairy lights that twinkled like stars. They started Friday night movie marathons, complete with homemade popcorn and blankets piled high on the couch. Camille wanted her daughter to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she was loved. And for the most part, it felt like they were winning. But the past wasn't done with them yet. The call that changed everything. It happened on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Camille was at work, catching up on emails, when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something in her gut told her to answer. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello?" A pause. Then. "Ms. Parker, this is Officer Ramirez with the local police department. We need you to come down to the station. It's about Daniel Carter." Camille's grip on the phone tightened. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "What about him? We need to discuss it in person." Camille felt the air leave her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then, she forced herself to stand. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. A man's fall from grace. Nicole went with her. The two of them sat across from Officer Ramirez in a small, windowless room at the police station. Daniel Carter was arrested 2 nights ago, he said, flipping through a file. Multiple charges. Domestic violence, assault, and, he hesitated. Child endangerment. Camille's stomach churned. Whose child? Not yours. Ramirez looked at her carefully. Another woman. Another child. Silence filled the room. Camille's hands curled into fists. He had moved on. Found another woman. Another child to break. Her jaw clenched. Is she okay? She's safe now, Ramirez said. But it was bad. Camille closed her eyes for a moment, forcing back the wave of nausea. She had done everything right. Cut him out. Fought back. Protected Amira. And yet, he had still found another victim. Her fingers dug into the table. Why are you telling me this? Ramirez hesitated. Because during his arrest, he mentioned you. He was furious. Said you ruined his life and that you owe him for what happened. Nicole swore under her breath. Camille barely heard her. Her mind was spinning. Owe him, she repeated, voice icy. Ramirez nodded. We don't think he'll get out on bail, but we wanted you to be aware. Just in case. Camille took a slow, deep breath. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She was angry. And she was done letting this man haunt her. A mother's promise. That night, Camille sat on Amira's bed, watching her daughter sleep. She reached out, brushing a curl from her forehead. Amira stirred slightly but didn't wake. Camille exhaled softly. She had almost married a monster. Almost let him into their lives forever. But she hadn't. She had gotten out. And that was what mattered. Leaning down, she pressed a gentle kiss to Amira's forehead. No one will ever hurt you again, she whispered. I promise. And this time, she meant it. Strength forged in fire. Camille had thought she was done with Daniel. She had cut him out. Erased him from their lives. But now, sitting in the darkness of her living room after the police station visit, she realized something bitter and cold. Monsters don't just disappear. They lurk. They wait. They find new ways to creep into the light. And Daniel had done just that. Even from behind bars, he still wanted to poison her world. No more. She would not live in fear. She would not let this man's shadow reach Amira ever again. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Hello? Marcus, she said, gripping the phone. I need your help. A brother's protection. Marcus Parker was Camille's older brother. A military man. A man of action. A man who had spent years serving in the army and now ran his own private security firm. If there was anyone she could trust to keep her family safe, it was him. 2 days later, he was at her door. Marcus was tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet intensity of a man who had seen too much of the world's darkness. His eyes softened only when he saw Amira, who ran into his arms without hesitation. Uncle Marcus. Hey, kiddo, he murmured, hugging her tight. Missed you. Camille watched them, her heart aching. Amira needed this. She needed to feel safe. And so did Camille. As soon as Amira went to her room, Marcus turned to Camille, all business. Tell me everything. She told him. Everything. Daniel's arrest. His threats. Her fear that he would somehow find a way back into their lives. Marcus listened, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. When she finished, he exhaled. You did the right thing. Did I? Camille whispered. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected her from the start. Marcus shook his head. You did protect her. You got out. And now, you make sure he never comes back. He leaned forward. I'll handle security. Cameras. Locks. If he gets out, I'll know the second he steps near you. Camille's throat tightened. You don't have to do all that. Yes. I do. His voice was firm. Because no one messes with my sister. Or my niece. Camille swallowed the lump in her throat. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to relief. The last goodbye. Camille had one last thing to do. She hadn't been back to the wedding venue since that disastrous day. But today, she needed closure. She needed to bury the last remnants of Daniel. So she went. The hall was empty, silent. She stood at the altar where she had once imagined saying I do. Now, all she felt was rage. She reached into her bag, pulling out something she had kept for too long, her engagement ring. She stared at it, the symbol of a lie, a mistake, a wound she had let fester for too long. Then, without hesitation, she hurled it across the room. It hit the floor with a sharp clink, rolling, disappearing into the shadows. Camille exhaled. She was done. She turned and walked away without looking back. A future without fear. The following weeks were different. Lighter. The weight on Camille's shoulders began to lift. The new security measures were in place. Marcus checked in constantly. And Amira, sweet, strong Amira, was laughing again. One night, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Amira suddenly looked up at her. Mom? Yeah, baby? Are you happy now? Camille blinked. She thought about the question. For so long, she had thought happiness meant finding someone. Finding love. Building a family. But now, sitting here with her daughter, safe, whole, free. She smiled. Yes, baby, she whispered. I am. Amira grinned, resting her head on Camille's shoulder. And for the first time in a long time, Camille believed it. A new dawn, a new beginning. The darkest storms always left a trail of destruction in their wake. For months, Camille had fought to rebuild. To restore the world she and Amira had before Daniel came into their lives. Now, she wasn't just fighting. She was winning. The scars remained, faint echoes of the past, but they no longer controlled her. The fear, the self-doubt, the guilt, she had faced them all. And she had survived. But there was one final step left. And she was ready to take it. The return to normalcy. Life had settled into something steady, something safe. Amira had started therapy on a regular basis, and each session chipped away at the shadows Daniel had left behind. She was writing again, but this time, her journal wasn't a hiding place. It was a canvas for her dreams, her thoughts, her hopes. One afternoon, Camille sat beside her on the couch, watching as she flipped through its pages. What are you writing about? Camille asked softly. Amira hesitated, then smiled. Us. Camille's heart swelled. Can I read it? Amira considered this for a moment before handing her the journal. Camille's hands trembled slightly as she opened to the first page. It wasn't a diary entry. It was a letter. A letter to her. Dear Mom. You always tell me that I saved you. But I think you saved me first. When I was scared, you held me. When I was quiet, you listened. When I thought I was a problem, you showed me I wasn't. I don't need a stepdad. I don't need a big fancy family. I just need you. And I think that's enough. Camille felt her throat tighten, her eyes burning with tears. She looked up at Amira, who was watching her carefully. Baby. Amira scooted closer, resting her head against Camille's shoulder. "I love you, Mom." Camille pressed a kiss to the top of her head, pulling her close. "I love you more." And she meant it. More than anything in the world. A chance encounter. 2 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Camille found herself standing outside Amira's school. She was early, so she leaned against her car, letting the breeze carry away the last traces of winter. She had just pulled out her phone when a familiar voice made her freeze. "Camille?" Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, she turned. And there he was. Daniel. He looked different. Thinner. Haggard. His once perfectly styled hair was now messy, and his eyes that had once charmed her, were cold. Camille's body went rigid. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, protective. Daniel lifted his hands. "Relax. She cut him off. "You're not supposed to be near me." "I know," he admitted. "I just wanted to talk." She clenched her jaw. There was a time when his voice would have made her weak. When she would have let him talk his way back into her life. But that time was over. "There's nothing to talk about," she said firmly. "Leave." He exhaled sharply. "You think you won? That you ruined me?" His voice had an edge now. "I lost everything because of you." Camille's eyes narrowed. "No," she said coldly. "You lost everything because of you." Daniel's face darkened. "You act like you're so much better than me. Like you never made a mistake. But you chose me, Camille. You let me in. And now you're acting like you're perfect?" Camille inhaled slowly. Once, those words would have cut her. Now, they meant nothing. She took a step forward, voice steady, unshaken. "The only mistake I made was giving you a chance." She met his gaze, unwavering. "But I fixed that. And now? You don't exist to me." Daniel's jaw twitched. "You think you're untouchable?" "No," Camille said. "I think I'm free." And with that, she turned her back on him. And walked away. She never looked back. And she never would. Freedom and closure. That night, Camille sat with Amira on the balcony, watching the stars. She felt light. Free in a way she hadn't in years. She had faced her demon. And she had won. She had a future now. A real one. Not one filled with doubt and regret. Not one haunted by the past. A real, beautiful future. She looked over at Amira, who was staring up at the sky with a peaceful expression. "You know," Amira said, "I think we should take a trip." Camille raised an eyebrow. "A trip?" "Yeah. Just us. Somewhere fun. Maybe the beach?" Camille chuckled. "You want a vacation?" Amira grinned. "We deserve one." Camille thought about it. For years, she had put everything else first. Her career. Her responsibilities. But maybe it was time to just live. Just her and Amira. She smiled. "You know what?" she said. "That sounds like a great idea." Amira's face lit up. And for the first time in forever, Camille felt like she was stepping into something new. Something good. Something better. And she couldn't wait to see where it led. A journey to healing and a future worth living. For the first time in what felt like forever, Camille Parker woke up feeling free. Not just physically. Not just legally. Truly, emotionally free. Daniel was gone. His presence no longer hovered over her life like a storm waiting to break. She had faced him. She had walked away. And she had won. But winning wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about stepping into the future. A future that, for the first time in years, felt limitless. And it was time to embrace it. The mother-daughter adventure begins. It was Amira's idea. A trip. Just the two of them. A celebration of everything they had overcome. Camille hadn't taken a real vacation in years. Her life had always been about survival, about schedules, about making sure everything ran smoothly. But now, there was no excuse. No reason to wait. So, on a bright Saturday morning, she packed their bags, grabbed her keys, and loaded Amira into the car. "Where are we going again?" Amira asked, adjusting her seatbelt. Camille smiled. "You'll see." They drove for hours, music blasting, the wind whipping through the open windows. And for the first time in a long time, Camille didn't feel like she was running away from something. She was running toward something. A new beginning. The beach and the magic of letting go. They arrived at a small coastal town by evening. The ocean stretched out before them, endless and shimmering under the setting sun. Amira stepped onto the sand, her curls bouncing as she spun around. "It's perfect." Camille laughed, kicking off her shoes. "Come on, let's feel the water." The waves lapped at their feet as they walked along the shoreline. Amira looked up at her. "Do you think we'll ever forget everything that happened?" Camille took a deep breath. "No," she admitted. "And that's okay." Amira frowned. "But why?" "Because our past doesn't disappear," Camille said, kneeling so they were at eye level. "But it also doesn't define us. We learn from it. We grow. And we move forward." Amira was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "So, we don't forget. We just don't let it hold us back." Camille smiled. "Exactly." For a moment, they just stood there, letting the waves wash over their feet. Then, suddenly, Amira laughed. Not a small chuckle. Not a forced giggle. A real, full, joyful laugh. Camille blinked in surprise. "What's so funny?" Amira grinned. "You're about to get splashed." Before Camille could react, a wave crashed against them, soaking them both. She gasped. "Oh, you planned that, didn't you?" Amira took off running down the beach, giggling. And Camille, for the first time in years, chased after her. Laughing. Living. Finally free. A letter to herself. That night, as Amira slept soundly in the hotel room, Camille sat on the balcony, watching the waves roll in. She pulled out a notebook. And she started writing. A letter. Not to Amira. Not to Daniel. But to herself. To the woman she used to be. To the woman who had once believed she wasn't strong enough to walk away. Dear Camille. I forgive you. I forgive you for not seeing the signs sooner. I forgive you for trusting the wrong person. I forgive you for the nights you stayed up wondering if you were making a mistake. Because you weren't weak. You weren't blind. You were just a woman who wanted love. Who wanted a future. Who believed in something beautiful. And that is not a crime. But here's what you did that makes you strong. You left. You fought. You chose your daughter over everything else. You didn't let guilt hold you down. And now? Now, you are free. So, live. Love. Breathe. Because you deserve it. Love. The woman you became. The true happy ending. The next morning, Camille woke up to the smell of fresh waffles. She found Amira sitting at the hotel's breakfast table, grinning. I ordered for us. Camille chuckled. You're getting too independent. Amira shrugged playfully. I learned from the best. They spent the day exploring the town, visiting small shops, eating ice cream by the pier, making silly faces in photo booths. And Camille realized something. This simple, beautiful, joyful life. This was the love story she had been searching for all along. Not with a man. Not with a fairy tale romance. But with her daughter. With herself. And for the first time in a long time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.